Evil gods have descended, plunging the world into apocalypse and chaos as humans turn into zombies. As always, our MC is betrayed by his girlfriend and best friend, but he somehow magically goes back in time to change everything. Along with this, he gets the power to control the flames and a whole prison of evil gods at his disposal. In this prison, time stands still, and he can store food without worrying about it spoiling, and even animals and captives without fear of them escaping or starving to death. Let's find out how it all began. The blood moon rose on top of the ruined city. In the rubble of the broken metropolis, our MC, Xiayan, had been beaten, bloodied, and broken. In the distance, demons wreaked havoc without a single ounce of mercy for the population. Their strong strides and powerful limbs destroyed skyscrapers, tearing through concrete like paper. Under the demons' command was an army of zombies, undead monsters hungry for human flesh. The few survivors tried to run for their lives, desperately clinging to non-existent hope. Our boy was continuously trampled and kicked while he was down, a witch snickering at his misfortune. She then started dousing his wounded body with gasoline, covering every inch. The witch and the caped villain said their sarcastic farewells. While they flaunt their stolen treasure, the caped villain stole the most precious thing that Xiayan owned, the token of the sixth great hell. He looked at the man he considered his best friend as the gasoline painfully stung his open wounds. His only concern was the well-being of his missing little sister. The villain stimulated the token, summoning the power of a monstrous bear that was wearing the skulls of its victims as a necklace. The smug villain confessed that Xiayan's adorable little sister had already been dragged to her miserable resting place for being a nuisance. At least her pure blood was still quite useful for something else. As furious as he was, Xiayan did not have the strength to stand up, let alone fight back. The retreating survivors looked up to the villain with hope. They knew him as Shujun, the strongest ability user blessed by the gods. As Shujun took the witch into his arms and flew away, he left Xiayan with a painful parting gift. A lit lighter aimed to burn him alive. The giant demon continued its destructive advance until it was met with the summoned giant bear. Unchained from its restraints, the gargantuan animal wrestled with the pale demon. It was a full-on kaiju battle. At the same time, Xiayan's body was swallowed by the fiery ignition. He gritted his teeth through the agonizing sensation of his skin being burnt to a crisp as he desperately wished for a do-over. Xiayan vowed that if the afterlife exists, he definitely won't let those who wronged him go unscathed. Fueled by hate and agony, his right eye assimilated with the flames as he heard a playful voice granting him his wish. His heartbeat slowed to a crawl, and with one final pump, the flow of time reversed. The fiery power coalesced in his eye as the physical and emotional pain he felt was imprinted on his soul. Xiayan woke up in the comfort of his own bed, sweating from what seemed like a long and feverish nightmare. The wounds and the burns were gone. Could the voice he heard on the brink of death be real? He rummaged around the bed and found his phone. He saw the date, July 1st, 2028, 3 whole days before the apocalypse started. Putting on a shirt, he ran to the bathroom to sober up and try to make sense of what he just went through. He still could not believe that everything had started over. He felt normal and healthy. The only difference was the change in his right eye. It turned pale gold in color thanks to the fire seed left buried in him as he was burned to death. Xiayan quickly took a moment to calm down and adapted to the situation surprisingly fast. He suited up and went out the door. He took his first steps outside and took in the sights. His neighborhood wasn't necessarily nice to look at, but all of it would look a lot worse 3 days from now. The apocalypse will arrive, and it will turn many humans into zombies, along with the descent of strange gods. Some humans would awaken powers to stand for themselves, but resistance would be ultimately futile. Cities would be turned into hellscapes overrun by demons, with the few survivors fighting for limited resources to survive. His girlfriend, the witch Ruolan, and his best friend, the traitorous Shijun, would betray him without batting an eye. Speaking of the literal devil, Ruolan started ringing him up. Xiayan picked up the phone, and the shrill witch's voice immediately blared. She criticized him for not answering right away, asking if he was trying to break up. Ruolan had always been like this. Whenever something does not go her way, she threatens to end the relationship. In the past, his foolish and pathetic self would anxiously and desperately try to appease her. But now he could not give a single flying fuck. He simply answered, "Sure," confusing the witch. She was expecting Xiayan to beg for forgiveness like a puppy after all. Xiayan doubled down, finally breaking it off with the witch. He's tired of her conniving ass. He does not want to be a glorified servant anymore. He hung up and stashed his phone in his pocket. Gaining some semblance of peace, he locked in. Xiayan knew that he had to hurry up and take care of business with his limited time. Back in Ruolan's home, she angrily threw her phone away after being cut off before she could start cursing Xiayan out. That dog of hers had the gall to hang up and block her so fast. The witch and Shujun just finished a round of smashing pissers. He asked if Xiayan finally found out about their little fling. But that shouldn't be possible. Ruolan had the loser on a leash, never disobeying her orders and demands. Shijun just laughed. He didn't give a shit either way. He was more concerned about the message his old man sent him about collecting some ancient family heirlooms filled with spiritual energy, as something big might happen soon. Ruolan remembered her loser boyfriend talking about a family heirloom token before. She recalled that the ugly, centuries-old artifact is currently owned by Xiayun, Xiayan's sister. Ruolan believed that her dog would always come back to her for forgiveness. At that time, she'll just demand the token. Pleased by her ingenuity, Shijun straddled the witch, and they went for another round of hide the sausage. The token they were just talking about was a poorly maintained slab of antique. Xiayan had rushed over 30 kilometers in a cab to his sister's school to ask for the token, ditching his day job. Xiayun asked what was wrong with his eyes, and he refused to explain. He just asked his little sister if she trusts her big bro. They have been incredibly close since they were young, so obviously she did. The two have always relied on each other growing up. If there is one person that Xiayun would trust unconditionally, it would be her big bro. She knows that everything he does is for her own good. Since that was the case, Xiayan tasked her to pack her things and come with him immediately. She obliged and asked for 2 hours to prepare her stuff. Xiayan wanted to know why she did not even ask for further explanation. Like she said, Xiayun trusted her big bro more than anyone else in the world. He watched as she ran to pack her stuff up. He vowed that this time, he would make sure that Yun would be safe and sound. To do that, he will need the family heirloom resting in his palm. All he could remember was Shijun opening some sort of portal and summoning a giant beast using the rusty old thing. He wondered how that snake managed to do such a mythical feat. Suddenly, the fire seed in his golden eye shot out and hit the token's surface. The heat from the fire melted the rusty surface and revealed the token's original form. This is an ancient artifact connected to the sixth great hell. Xia Yan was suddenly sucked into a wormhole of sorts, traveling inside the token's separate dimension. The portal eventually spat him out into an entirely different realm filled with perpetual darkness. In the middle of it was a giant tower with countless crimson chains attached in every direction. He could not even find the words to explain what he was seeing. Inside the tower was a plethora of monsters and demons from all sorts of eras, locked up and desperate to get out. They all looked at him with their penetrating glares as he descended to its entrance. The monsters and demons tried to scare him with their snarls and gazes, and it was incredibly effective. Then, a lightning tribulation struck the tower with an ungodly amount of force. The lightning seemingly aimed at the monsters that dared to intimidate Xia Yan. Each one of them suffered a painful demise as the destructive power mutilated their grotesque bodies. The destructive tribulation continued to go wild, seemingly connecting to Xia Yan himself. A mysterious power was suppressing the monsters in the tower. Right then and there, he heard the same playful voice he heard before his life was snuffed out before time reversed. The mysterious entity's lips curved into a smile, revealing her fangs. Xia Yan's guard immediately went up and stared at the humanoid creature in front of him. She introduced herself as Sudaji, a beautiful nine-tailed fox. She extended a respectful greeting to Xia Yan, the new Hell's prison warden. You see, tens of thousands of years ago, the immortal emperor gathered 12 immortals, Tai Bai, Tai Shang, the three pure ones, Guan Yin, Fuxi, Xuanu, and others, to jointly forge the demon-suppressing tower. The finished product was dubbed the Sixth Great Hell, the nightmare of every evil incarnate out there. Throughout the ages, all sorts of powerful beasts, monsters, and demons were locked away for their grievous sins. In the Tower of Endless Punishment, they suffered the torment of soul-burning heavenly lightning day and night. The pardon token in Xia Yan's hand is the only key that can unlock the door to this fearsome place. That's also why Sudaji referred to him as the new warden. Since this was his first time in this place, the fox invited him to go inside and check on his prisoners. She promised to give him a more detailed report of the place as they walked through. Curious and intrigued by what this all meant, Xia Yan took her up on her invitation. He walked up to the ominous door as if he had nothing to lose. As soon as he entered, he was greeted by the swift weaving of violent energy bouncing around the first floor. Sudaji warned him to look out and be careful of those dancing waves. As if by instinct, his golden eye lit up as it summoned a seemingly conscious trail of fire that protected him from the malevolent energy. Sudaji was impressed with how efficiently he handled the tower's first surprise. She identified the flame in his eyes as the nether fire seed. It must be the catalyst that made it possible for him to restart his life after death in the underworld. Sudaji also confessed that she contacted him as his life flickered away. The bond between the fox and the Jia family runs deep. She had been the guiding spirit of the Sixth Great Hell for a long time now, and she could not bear to see Yan get killed by pathetic villains. The despair and anger at the moment of death must have awakened his flame ability, igniting the nether fire seed. She barely had to do anything. That's one big question answered. Now that the apocalypse is inching closer once more, he won't be as useless and helpless as he was in the past. This time, he was determined to do everything differently. Itching to learn more about this tower, Xia Yan asked Sudaji to proceed and lead the way. She explained that the Sixth Great Hell is divided into 5 layers. Based on Xia Yan's soul power, the doors to another floor would light up, representing his current limit. The higher he can go, the stronger imprisoned creatures he can encounter. So, he'll need to increase his soul power fast to face them. Right now, the only section is lit, and the only accessible area is the one on the ground floor. Behind the prison cell was a familiarly terrifying figure. It was the same gigantic beast that Shujun summoned and rode in his previous life. Curiosity got the best of Xia Yan, and they walked a little too close to the prison cell, waking up the monster as it roared a terrifying war cry. What happened next shocked him to his core. The monstrous beast started acting like a cuddly pet, seemingly pleased to see the new warden of the prison. It praised Xia Yan for being young and promising. The prisoners of the tower had been waiting for a new warden to arrive for thousands of years after all. The beast even offered its services if Xia Yan ever needed anything. The shameless black bear even tried to sneak a kiss in before being kicked away by Su Dija for daring to get close to the warden. As it turned out, the fox just wanted to get first dibs on licking Xia Yan lovingly first. She did not want any competition for the warden's attention. She complained that these 1,000-year-old demon kings had only been imprisoned for a few thousand years and had already turned into attention-hungry dogs. But not everyone was like Black Bear. Some of the prisoners did not approve of the young warden, only relying on his token. The chained-up bird-looking demon would rather get struck by heavenly lightning for another 1,000 years than grovel at the kid. Accounting for Sudaji and the black bear demon, it seems like the tower holds an untold number of legendary creatures. Xia Yan let his eyes wander until they fell on the black bear's next-door neighbor. He could see the demon's back, a muscular body with demonic wings attached. The demon turned around, showing its humanoid face with a sharp beak. He recognized the demon from the ancient stories and myths, the thunder god, Lei Genji. Sudaji praised the warden for immediately recognizing another prisoner at a glance. She clarified that in this world, monsters are ranked as soldiers, generals, commanders, kings, sages, and beyond. Since Xia Yan only had access to the lowest level of the tower, he could only see general-level criminals. The stronger he becomes and the higher he goes, the stronger the prisoners he could encounter. It is said that the topmost layer even held sage-level immortal criminals. Sudaji had heard Lady Nua sigh about how they once held god-level beings in the tower, but they had been lost to the sands of time. The fox urged the young warden to work hard and ascend the ranks to control the entire prison. Xia Yan was more than just a little overwhelmed by the scale of this responsibility. The tower is more formidable than anything his mind could have imagined. The general-level beasts on the lowest level are already powerful enough to cause ruinous amounts of destruction with their power. The prisoners on the top floor must be world-ending nightmares. But no matter what abomination was locked up on top, they would all just be prisoners under the warden's control in the future. In the coming apocalypse, he has the potential to become the strongest. With his minuscule soul power, this is as far as they can go for now. Xie Yan would have to absorb a lot more soul power to light up more rooms and ascend. Sudaji also expounded that soul power is different from awakened abilities. Abilities can be strengthened by absorbing crystal cores from zombies and mutants. Soul power, on the other hand, can only be obtained by killing gods. In 3 days, when those deities descend upon Earth, his hunt will officially begin. Before eradicating the gods, he needs to make all the necessary preparations. Xia Yan found himself in the busy antique street. In his previous life, someone stumbled upon a binding immortal rope from one of the stalls and became a powerful ability user. At this point in time, the treasure should still be for sale on this street. Thankfully, the energy radiating from the antique display cannot escape his nether fire seed. Coincidentally, the head of the Song family and father of Xu Jun, Song Tian, is also roaming the streets to shop with Elder Huang, his trusted antique appraiser. Song Tian spotted Xia Yan looking around the stalls, confused that the young man had an interest in the wares. He remembered reminding his son to pick friends that would be useful one way or another, and Xu Jun assured him that Xia Yan was just a foolishly loyal guy who was easy to manipulate. Song Tian did not pay the young man too much attention and continued their search for valuable antiques. Elder Huang assured him that with his discerning eyes, they could get a decent haul. It's too bad that most antiques on display are useless. Song Tian just got back from an ancestral worship ceremony where he dreamt of his ancestors telling him to search for ancient artifacts. He did not know what for, but he decided to give it a go. Suddenly, Elder Huang lit up at the sight of a gourd tied to the door of one of the antique shops. The old man immediately ran to snag it for the taking, but someone else had already gotten to it. The shop owner was glad to find another gullible customer he could scam. But that gullible customer was Xia Yan. The owner spouted some bullshit about the gourd being an artifact from the Ming dynasty. He set the price at 10,000, and Xia Yan immediately recoiled at such an expensive price tag. The young man pretended to inspect the gourd for any damage or peculiarities. He argued that the gourd had cracks, and it was tied with a cheap broken string. Xia Yan started haggling for the antique, setting his price at 100 yuan at most. The shop owner immediately grabbed the gourd out of his hands and told him to piss off. At that moment, Elder Huang and Song Tian swooped in to inspect the antique for themselves, not knowing that Xia Yan had already received the treasure for free. It was the shoddy red string tied around the gourd. No one could have thought that the inconspicuous little string would become so valuable in the coming days. It is the magical treasure dubbed as the Binding Immortal Rope. He was only able to spot it thanks to his nether fire seed vision. Quietly tucking the magical treasure in his pockets, he decided to stick around to have a little bit of fun and do a little bit of trolling. In his previous life, his little sister was captured by the Song family after stealing the token. They used her as a blood sacrifice for some twisted ritual. This time, Big Bro is hell-bent on making the whole Song clan pay. Elder Huang verified that the gourd has some faint spiritual aura of ancient origin. He must have sensed the remnant power of the string. Trusting the old man's vision, Song Tian asked for the price of the gourd. Xia Yan slyly interrupted and called Uncle Song's attention with a polite greeting. Song Tian returned the greeting and made some small talk. The shrewd businessman even brought up the ancient heirloom that Xia Yan had, saying that he wanted to talk about possibly acquiring it later. In reply to that bold proposal, Xia Yan raised his voice and name-dropped the wealthy Song Tian as loud as he could to attract everyone's attention. He strongly implied that Uncle Song must be trying to buy something very valuable. With the streets full of enthusiasts trying to strike it rich in Antique Street, a crowd of fanatics quickly surrounded the stall and saw the famous Elder Huang, the appraiser. The hungry hyenas quickly offered a higher initial price than 10,000 for the gourd. Song Tian was irked by the ensuing bidding war, asserting that he found the treasure first. The bid had quickly reached 20,000. The antique enthusiasts drove up the price to 50,000 in the blink of an eye as the shopkeeper encouraged the bidding war to line his pockets. By the end of the brutal auction, Song Tian had to pay 70,000 more than the asking price. He was supposed to get a possible treasure for just 10,000, but ended up overpaying because of Xia Yan's stunt. The young man stuck around to talk to Song Tian about his family heirloom. Uncle Song remained civil and asked the young man to see the token. He quickly took it out of his pocket and willingly let them see it from afar. Elder Huang could already tell that the token was a real treasure, and he wanted to take a closer look to confirm. Xia Yan quickly put the token back into his pocket and denied their request for a closer look. Song Tian tried to appeal to the young man's friendship with his son, asking for a favor for his dear old uncle. Xia Yan asserted that he had nothing to do with Xu Jun anymore, and if there was nothing else, he'd take his leave. Finally, Song Tian offered compensation for just inspecting the artifact. Xia Yan took his phone out, showed them his PayPal ID, and asked for 10,000 for a 1-minute inspection. He could give them 5 minutes for a thorough look in exchange for 50,000. Song Tian gritted his teeth and gave in. Bro is just getting scammed left and right. Uncle Song begrudgingly transferred the money over, and the young man tossed the token to Elder Huang. While the suckers were inspecting every nook and cranny of the artifact, Xia Yan was already busy spending his cash. He ordered an ample stock of water and food. Since there are empty cells in the 6th Great Hell Prison, he could just store his supplies there. Sudaji informed him that any item placed in a separate dimension would remain unchanged. He could even store some live animals there, so she requested some chickens to snack on. She was a fox, after all. He bought so many essential supplies, from raw ingredients to perishables, that the vendors might think he's starting a farm. It did not take too long for him to run out of funds. Money really does run out quickly these days. After 5 minutes, he asked the old-ass duo if they wanted to buy some time extension, but Song Tian was already sold. He wanted to buy the token for himself. When the young man responded that he was open to selling, the old men lit up with glee. But the price point he set was way too much. Xia Yan started negotiations at 10 million. The glee on their faces just seconds ago vanished. Xia Yan quickly retrieved the token and asserted that it was an heirloom that had been passed through his family for thousands of years. He believes that 10 million was a fair price, but he was just giving them an unrealistic offer. With that being said, he took his leave. Elder Huang believes that the token was a genuine antique, but it should only be worth around 500,000. The old appraiser believes that he could get the token for 100,000 if they negotiated. But Song Tian was done with reasonable methods. He thanked Elder Huang for his help and asked him to take his leave. The ruthless business mogul called his son, Xu Jun, and ordered him to gather some clan members to find Xia Yan and his sister. He wanted the token and the siblings in one piece. That brat dared to mess with him for the whole day. As revenge, he would do as his ancestors asked, and prepare a young girl's blood for sacrifice. Xia Yun just happened to be the perfect candidate. Xia Yan could already tell that Song Tian was plotting his disgusting revenge. This was precisely what he was hoping for. He even regretted not extorting more money from the bastard. Xia Yan was just getting started with collecting debts for the Song family's transgressions. The young man went straight to his little sister's dorm and found Xia Yun waiting for him outside. She was all packed and ready to go. He took her luggage, ready to finally head home for the day. Before they could leave, a pretty woman with platinum hair came running in to stop the siblings. She must have run all the way through with how disheveled she looked. This is Bai Xin, Xiaoyun's homeroom teacher. Miss Bai tried to catch her breath and proceeded to ask why Xiaoyun suddenly got up and left school, knowing that there was an important exam the next day, an exam that would be crucial for her future. Xiaoyan introduced himself to the teacher and confessed that he was the one who was pulling her sister out of school for a temporary leave. Miss Bai argued that Xiaoyun is the top student in her class. She knew that the siblings' parents had passed away, leaving Xiaoyan to take care of his sister. Miss Bai expected him to be a responsible guardian, not the type to strain his sister's future. She refused to let her most promising student go without a valid reason. Miss Bai believes that Xiaoyun has a bright future ahead, and the young man is ruining it. The passionate teacher firmly believes that as long as the earth isn't exploding, Xiaoyun should not take this temporary leave for whatever reason. Miss Bai quickly realized that she must have crossed a line with her words, but she was just concerned for her prized student. Feeling bad for intruding on family matters, she still insisted on continuing Xiaoyun's education. Xiaoyan took it pretty well. He thanked Miss Bai for looking out for his sister's best interests. As a token of his gratitude, he gave the teacher some valuable advice. With a serious tone, he asked her to stock up on as much food, water, medicine, and weapons as soon as she could. Most importantly, she should prepare a large supply of painkillers to help her get through the tough times ahead. Miss Bai was surprised at such a grim implication of his advice. It was as if he was saying the world is really going to end in the coming days. Leaving Miss Bai stunned in silence, the siblings went on their way. Back in Xiaoyan's home, Xiaoyun asked his big bro, "What's the plan now that she's here?" She wasn't dumb. She knew that her brother must be preparing for something big that was about to happen. He openly admitted that there would be some drastic changes in the coming days, but swore to protect her with all his might. He fashioned the token into a necklace and made Xiaoyun wear it while he goes out for a bit. He asked her to never open the door for anyone, no matter what. Xiaoyun kept her cheerful attitude, promising her big bro a hearty meal when he came back. The token on her neck would allow Xiaoyan to sense her whereabouts at any time. For now, he needs more funds as soon as possible. Xiaoyan got out of the elevator and noticed that the witch was waiting for him in the lobby. She was on a call with someone, blatantly talking about the siblings with an irate tone. On the other side of the line was that snake, Shujun, telling Ruolan to keep the loser occupied while he and his boys do their thing. Seeing that Xiaoyan had finally shown his face, the witch tried to use her feminine charm and invited him to grab a late-night snack with Shujun, like old times. Xiaoyan doesn't want to waste another breath with this witch, so he just shoves her out of the way. But Ruolan was either extremely persistent, or she just couldn't read the room. She grabbed his arm and asked if they were really breaking up after everything they'd been through. She thought he was just being childishly jealous about something, so she came all the way out here to see him. Xiaoyan pushed her once more. Just the thought that he was ever in a relationship with her is making him sick. He warned her to stay the hell away from him from now on. Ruolan went on the offensive, calling him ungrateful. Her words no longer held any power over the young man. Xiaoyan just exited the building, leaving the conniving witch. Ruolan's ego was shattered, and she quickly reverted to being the demanding waste of space that she was. Xiaoyan waved the deed of his house in the air, telling her that he was going to sell it. The witch panicked. She was expecting to get the place once they got married. She had long since viewed it as their wedding house. Not only is Xiaoyan going to sell it, but he's going to sell it way below market price too. Xiaoyan's behavior just didn't make any sense. He started standing up for himself, and now he's selling a house left by his parents. It's in a prime location, worth at least 3 million. That house was her end goal. That's why she dated him. Quickly thinking on her feet, Ruolan returned to her gentle demeanor and asked how much he would sell the property for. To make the process easier and quicker, he's going to put it up for just 1 million. Ruolan was flabbergasted, thinking that Xiaoyan must be in some sort of trouble and needed to sell the house to pay off debts. The young man continued dangling the prospect of selling such a good property for such a low price in the face of the witch. She wanted to buy it for herself, but she didn't have the funds to do so yet. All she could do was give him 300,000 up front and pay the rest later. That's a no-go though. Xiaoyan's not looking for an installment plan. He wanted 1 million in cold hard cash. Ruolan considered the factors. She knew that Shujun was about to mess with the siblings, and Xiaoyan was as good as dead anyway. Even if the witch gave him 1 million, it'll come back to her. All she needed was to trick him into completing the property transfer. Finally, the witch caved in and agreed to a deal, inviting him to the real estate office ASAP. At the real estate office, Ruolan hopped on a call with her mom to get the rest of the cash, assuring her mother that the money would come back without a fuss. Witch's mom criticized her for dating a broke boy to the point of spending her own money and the family savings to buy his house. The witch nearly cursed her mom out, but she managed to keep it together. She was still thinking that Xiaoyan would be gone for good very soon. Getting impatient, the young man urged Ruolan to hurry up with the payment so he could sign the property over. The witch thought that he was falling right into her financial trap. Little did she know she was falling into his instead. When the apocalypse finally descends, every property on the planet will lose all its value. Without the 1 million in her personal and family savings, Ruolan would have nothing and would lose her last chance at survival. The witch was all smiles as the deal was completed, even inviting him back to the house to celebrate. This time, Xiaoyan did not turn her invitation down. As the sun set, Shujun and his goons walked around the back of the residential building with weapons in hand. Before Xiaoyan comes back, they intend to go upstairs to have a very, very deep conversation with his sister. The poor Xiaoyun was upstairs, diligently preparing a meal for her brother, unaware of what was about to happen. Unbeknownst to her, the token pendant she was wearing on her neck started emitting a strange energy. Soon the group of bandits led by Shujun were right in front of the apartment door. The bastard Shujun knocked on the door and called out to Xiaoyun. He hoped that the girl would open the door for him since he was her brother's friend. Hearing the knock, Xiaoyun went to the door. However, she was in no hurry to open the door even though she recognized Shujun's voice. She said that her brother wasn't at home and asked Shujun why he was here. He laughed in his usual manner and replied that he already knew about it. The bastard began to assure her that her brother had gone to buy ingredients for dinner while he had been asked to return home first. His words seemed very true to Xiaoyun, for she had no idea what was waiting for her on the other side of the door. Unconsciously, she reached for the door to open it. But suddenly she remembered the words of her brother who warned her not to open the door for anyone. Her brother's words instantly made her change her mind, because she trusted him more than anyone else. Turning to Shujun, she told him that he would have to wait until her brother returned. Her answer made the bastard furious. His friendly mask evaporated and his tone of voice became irritated. He pretended to be offended because she feared and distrusted him, and began to demand that Xiaoyun immediately open the door. But with this behavior, this jerk only made things worse, because Xiaoyun only became more convinced that she should not open the door. Realizing that his plan had failed, Shijun decided to go for more drastic methods. One of his friends had already brought a box of tools. They were going to use them to get inside the apartment. For these guys with criminal backgrounds, picking locks was not a new thing, and a lock like this should have fallen in minutes. While his friend was picking the lock, Shijun started to ask Xiaoyun if the symbol of their family belonged to her. Unsuspecting, she replied that her brother had just put it on her. The bastard's question didn't make much sense. His only purpose was to distract the girl while his gang broke the lock. Soon they had indeed succeeded in doing so. The very next moment, a bunch of scumbags with bats rushed inside. Isn't it a bit much to invade the home of a defenseless girl? Next time, they should get a bigger gang to be sure. Then the rest went on as expected. They grabbed Xiaoyun and Shijun started insulting her. He started talking about how it would have been over a lot faster if she'd opened the door first. He felt like a god now, because he had the relic that his father wanted, as well as Xiaoyun's sister. All that remained was to bring that insolent bastard to his knees and make him apologize. After freeing herself from the bastard's grip, Xiaoyun began to ask Shijun why he was doing this. After all, as she thought, he was her brother's friend. Shijun had no intention of hiding anything else. He replied with a crazy smile that he was only friends with her brother because he was a naive fool who was very easy to manipulate. He didn't even hide the fact that he had done many dirty things, which he planned to blame on Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan couldn't believe it, but the reality was cruel. Shijun turned out to be a real bastard who kept bragging about his vile deeds, including his relationship with her brother's girlfriend. His touches were vile, so Xiaoyun demanded to let her go. However, her words only made things worse. In response to her plea, the bastard only slapped her face. He told her not to even think of screaming, otherwise he threatened to gag her with his socks. Shijun's friends were just as scum as he was. They started asking if Xiaoyun was the proper age, to which he replied that they could check it out for themselves. Who knows what might have happened next if it wasn't for someone's sudden laughter. Its owner turned to the guys and asked if they had ever heard of the wine lake and meat forest. Immediately after these words, the surroundings seemed to magically begin to change. Just a couple of moments later, the guys found themselves in a lake with a bunch of beautiful girls. The atmosphere was so beautiful that they didn't even have any questions about how they got here. It was literally a heavenly place. At least it would seem so at first glance. The girls kept hugging them and giving them meat and calling them kings. When asked if they liked the meat, the guys said it was incredibly delicious. Nothing seemed to portend trouble, but suddenly the atmosphere changed, and a white-haired girl with a wry smile said that the meat they were eating was their own. Right after that, all the girls suddenly disappeared and the water in the lake became blood-colored. The haughty smiles on the bastards' faces changed to fear and terror. The paradise place they were in had turned into a real hell. Sudaji, who had created all this on purpose, asked if they didn't like the menu. While these wretched bastards' minds were imprisoned in the world of illusion, in the real world, they were writhing in agony. They didn't even realize that their punishment had just begun. Xiaoyan only watched from the sidelines, not realizing what was happening. Finally, the bastards came to their senses, scared to death of seeing the ghost. But they still couldn't understand where the illusion ended and reality began. Shijun was holding up better than the others, but he also didn't understand where the ghost illusion came from. He and his gang had killed many innocent souls, but now for the first time they felt fear and hesitation in front of this little girl. Then the idea came to him that the reason could be this strange token. Shijun took it out and started yelling at it, calling it broken old trash that couldn't kill him in any way. But the power contained within the heirloom token thought otherwise. A clawed paw appeared from the token, and quickly made Shijun realize who the trash really was by leaving deep cuts on his face. The bastard immediately screamed in pain and let go of the token, which immediately rolled across the floor. It finally fell right at Xiaoyan's feet. Our hero picked it up and went into his apartment. He returned just in time to watch the wretched criminals in person and punish them properly. The Shijun gang immediately realized how much trouble they were in. But then the witch Ruolan appeared, demanding an explanation of what was going on. As soon as she saw the injured Shijun, she rushed over to him. The rest of the gang began to come to their senses, and Shijun ordered them not to let our hero leave with the treasure. Xiaoyun only had time to warn her brother to be careful. Confident in their numerical advantage and bats, the bastards moved forward. Attacking all at once, they hoped to win quickly, but our hero stood still. He wasn't afraid of these losers at all. However, there was a problem that Sudaji had told him about. The Raven General used his power to strike Shijun's face with his claw, but he did so without Xiaoyan's permission and used up all of his token power. The Bear General was upset that he couldn't appear and show his power, but our hero was only happy about it, because if he had shown up, the house would have definitely been destroyed. This apartment is too small a stage for such powerful creatures. Their turn will come later. He could easily deal with such a bunch of losers with his own strength. Xiaoyan didn't even have to lift a finger to send flames directly at these scumbags. The burning thugs didn't realize what was happening. This was the first time they had encountered such an incredible power. It was as if the fire was intelligent, for there was nothing burning in the room except the thugs themselves. The flames were incredibly hot, and no matter how hard they tried rolling around on the floor, they couldn't put it out. Even water couldn't put out the flames, no matter how much these losers looked to it for salvation. The flames were only extinguished when they fell dead. This was the first time Shijun and Ruolan had seen such a thing, and they were even at a loss for words. Now the main bastard Shijun was truly afraid for his own skin. He had no idea that Xiaoyan could use magic. The frightened witch Ruolan begged Xiaoyan to stay away from them, and instead remember that Shijun was his best friend, and she was his girlfriend. Our hero was in no mood to show mercy to such trash. Shijun dared to come to his house, took his sister as hostage and tried to steal a token, and Ruolan the disgusting witch had acted to distract and delay him. Just looking at them made Xiaoyan simply sick, and they still dare to reminisce about their old friendship. Shijun stood up and started to play the most innocent person in the world who doesn't understand what Xiaoyan is talking about. At the same time, he quietly whispered to Ruolan to go and distract our hero since she was his girlfriend. Shijun himself took out a knife behind his back, and continued to tell how he couldn't wait to be the best man at Ruolan and Xiaoyan's wedding. Ruolan started to play along with him and asked our hero to marry her. She was even ready to forgive him for having nothing. Isn't that true love? The only thing she wanted to know was how he got such power, and then she would love him forever. At first it seemed like her spell had worked, and Shijun saw it as an opportunity to make a sneak attack. But it was all useless. Xiaoyan could easily see their real intentions through the cheap game. Therefore, he was ready to deal with them right now. A stream of flames from his eye captured the rotten couple and made this world a little cleaner before the apocalypse. Watching the flames, our hero thought about why he got this power and realized why. All to purify this world of filthy creatures like Shijun and Ruolan. He will scorch all such filth from the face of this planet. Meanwhile, at the Song family's family estate, their entire clan gathered together to witness the clan leader address the ancestors. Song bowed before the altar and began to ask the ancestors to bless and help his family, so that their wealth would become limitless. The spirit of the ancestors appeared from the altar and demanded ancient spiritual artifacts and the girl's blood in return. The pitiful ancient flask that Mr. Song had bought so dearly did not satisfy the spirit at all. Ancestors wanted a real sacrifice and real artifacts. Mr. Song began to promise that there is nothing to worry about. In just a few minutes, Shijun should arrive with the girl and the artifact. But the spirit was simply furious that he had to wait with such ungrateful descendants. Even so, he had a message for them. The end of the world, a worldwide apocalypse, is coming in 3 days. It sounded incredible to Mr. Song, but he could not doubt the words of the ancestor spirit. Therefore, he immediately called out to his clan, urging them to immediately send all their manpower and resources to buy up water and food in large quantities. If what the ancestor spirit said was true, the end of the familiar world would come very soon. Song also sent his assistant to quickly find Shijun and his captives. They need to make a sacrifice as soon as possible. However, no one had time to even move when the estate's gate shattered into pieces. Xiaoyan epically entered the scene and brought with him a piece of trash called Shijun. Now Mr. Song could not worry about him not showing up. There was one thing though. Shijun arrived in the wrong state, but our hero came to this hornet's nest by himself. Mr. Song was shocked to see his son in such a state. He couldn't even imagine how a loser and poor man like Xiaoyan dared to do such a thing to his son, and then come to the family estate, destroying everything in his path. Song immediately ordered the clan to kill this insolent guy. A dozen bandits immediately rushed towards our hero. Xiaoyan could only laugh at their foolishness. He closed his eyes, while preparing a fiery greeting for them, and when he opened his eyes again, flames burst out. Xiaoyan tagged each bandit with a mark, and after that, nothing could save them anymore. So our hero went through their lines without any problems, and the flames hit only those who tried to stop him. Now he was left alone with the frightened Song, who immediately lost all his arrogance. Behind Xiaoyan, the remnants of the gang were squirming in the flames, and our hero was about to make the main villain pay. But even cornered and scared to death, Song wasn't about to give up. He had one last hidden trump card up his sleeve, a gun, and he was going to use it without a doubt. However, just as he pulled the trigger, Xiaoyan used his flame control ability, and blew up the gun right in the villain's hand. Mr. Song was injured in 2 hands at once. Our hero only laughed at him, saying that he shouldn't have played with gunpowder. Xiaoyan himself couldn't get enough of his strength. Even though he was of a low level, Void Fire gave him incredible abilities. With it, he could simultaneously control 10 flame sources with a volume of up to 10 square meters. But if there were explosives nearby, it could be even more. While our hero was thinking, Song used this moment to reach the altar and seek the help from the ancestors. The ancestor spirit couldn't allow the Song family's last heir to be destroyed. Therefore, it used its flame power to attack Xiaoyan. The power of this flame amplified by the evil spirits was so great that even our hero couldn't do anything. He even received substantial damage and was forced to retreat a little. At the same time, the wounds of Mr. Song and the rest of the clan members were healed. Now he had regained his confidence in himself and the strength of his ancestors again, and began to promise a very quick death for our hero. This time, Xiaoyan was facing a truly formidable opponent. To say the least, it was a real deity. Our hero really didn't expect the Song family to have their own god before the end of the world. After all, initially he just wanted to steal a few ancient things and make some money. But it turned out to be more complicated than he thought. The angry god who intended to destroy him was clearly not part of his plans. Fortunately, Xiaoyan managed to dodge the first blow. However, the deity was not going to stop. He tried to swat him as if he was a fly. At one point, it even looked like he had succeeded. Seeing this, Mr. Song began to celebrate his victory. But soon the expression on his face changed to shock and horror. What caused this? Well, it was simple. Our boy was safe and sound, and he was also riding the god himself. To understand what happened, we'll go back in time a bit. Just a moment before the attack, Sudaji had informed Xiaoyan that the deity in front of him was a natural fire spirit. Thanks to the family incense, he had managed to accumulate a lot of soul power over the past 1,000 years. And now he was literally one step away from descending to Earth in his true body. If our guy managed to capture and absorb him, he would be able to strengthen his fire abilities as well as strengthen his soul power. Currently, his token lacked soul power, but if he dared to take the risk, there might be a chance of victory. Xiaoyan didn't quite understand what Sudaji was talking about, and asked what she meant. She said that in order to pull this off, he needed to extract his own soul power and infuse it into the token of great crimes. Then he just needed to give an order and call one of the prisoners to help him. Xiaoyan realized that he could indeed do this. However, in the event that he failed in capturing the Firestar Lord and died, the one he summoned could escape from the prison. Insidious Sudaji inquired if he was willing to take the risk, but our boy had no intention of following her lead. The fox offered him 2 options, but he chose the third. The very next moment, he began to pour hellfire from his right eye into the token, shocking Sudaji. She had not expected this turn of events at all. When she asked what he was doing, Xiaoyan replied that if he died, the hellfire would destroy the token, and without the token, no one in the world would be able to open the prison. In other words, the prisoners would never see the sunlight again. Now they had no choice but to act in Xiaoyan's interests. Moreover, they would now have a good motivation to protect him. Without a second's hesitation, Xiaoyan began to open the summoning gate. The prisoners in the dungeons couldn't help but feel it. Many of them started screaming and begging to be let out. However, this time our hero was determined to summon the great demon Black Bear. As soon as the cell doors were opened, the bear rushed outside. Knowing its character, Sudaji shouted in its wake that the warden shouldn't die under any circumstances. Once in the real world, the Black Bear knocked the fire god to the ground, who clearly didn't expect to see him. But most of all, the bear was happy to finally be free after a long time. He was very happy to see the sunlight, and even started waving his paws vigorously. However, Xiaoyan quickly brought him to his senses. His soul power wouldn't be enough for a long matchmaking session, so he ordered the bear to act immediately. The Black Bear did not cross our hero, and replied that he had made the right choice when he called him. He rushed towards the fire god and began to strike him. Such a low-ranked god didn't stand a chance. All of the fire god's attempts to do anything were to no avail. He was shamefully defeated, with no chance to do anything. In addition, his divine body had crossed the line, making it impossible for him to use all of his strength. He tried to retreat, but Xiaoyan did not let him do so. Using the immortal rope, he bound the fire deity, who could only scream in panic now. This was our guy's unconditional victory. The Song family's ancestor, deprived of his power, was as much of a failure as his descendants. Now Mr. Song had lost all hope of victory and fell to the ground helplessly. But looking at the rope that bound the ancestor, he remembered where he had seen it before. It was the same rope that Xia Yan had taken from the artifact before he bought it. Our hero only laughed at the rich loser, thanks to whom he was able to get a rope capable of binding immortals for free. Poor Mr. Song had no choice but to cry like a child. His precious ancestor, whose power his family had fueled for thousands of years, was now vaporizing right before his eyes. In the end, his ancestor, a huge fire spirit, had turned into a small spiritual crystal, which Xia Yan could now easily hold in one hand. The Song family's entire inheritance was now in his hands. Now that everything was in his hands, our guy proposed to discuss a deal that Mr. Song wouldn't be able to refuse. Shijun turned out to still be alive, although he was still slumped over. So, Xia Yan offered to keep him alive in exchange for absolutely all of the Song family's money. That was a low blow to a greedy bastard like Mr. Song. But he knew that after the apocalypse came, this money would be worthless anyway. In the end, he agreed, and Xia Yan received the money and left to use it quickly. Shijun just couldn't believe what had happened. He couldn't even imagine being poor. But Mr. Song calmed him down, assuring him that the money would soon be useless anyway, and the main thing was to save and gather as many people as possible. For the rest of the surviving subordinates, Mr. Song ordered them to keep quiet about what had happened here, and hurry up and sell their properties. Then they should exchange all the money they received for rice and water. All the supplies they bought will have to be taken to the shelter under Mr. Song's country villa. There's plenty of room and a decent stockpile of weapons. He also instructed them to contact Old Man Huan and buy up all the ancient artifacts they could. Mr. Song was just furious that Xia Yan was the only one to be the first person who got the abilities because the end of the world was approaching. But he believed that it wasn't the end of the world, and if all the children of the Song family took advantage of the opportunity, the end of the world could be the beginning of their world domination. But as for Xia Yan, Mr. Song was ready to do everything he could to make his life a living hell. Meanwhile, our hero headed to the biggest pharmacy in the city. Thanks to the Song family's money, he now had almost 29 millions. Of course, if he had more time, he would have learned more about the Song family. But now he should forget about them, because the main thing is to prepare for the apocalypse. At the pharmacy, Xia Yan ordered 1,000 shanking pills at once. Of course, the pharmacist was shocked that someone needed so many ordinary medicine to reduce fever and neutralize poison. Our guy wasn't going to explain everything to her, he just wanted to buy everything quickly. If they didn't have the stuff he wanted, he could go to a competitor. Of course she didn't want to lose a customer, but to fulfill such an order she would need time and the delivery would take 2 days. Xia Yan knew that there are only 10,000 of these shanking pills in the city, most of which are sold online. You're probably wondering why he needed so many of these obscure pills. Well, when the apocalypse begins, this unremarkable medicine will be the most important material. In his past life, Xia Yan was infected with a zombie virus and suffered from its symptoms. He didn't want to die, but nothing depended on him. No matter how hard his little sister Xia Yun tried, she could not find the shanking pill to save him. As it turned out, the shanking pill was the only medicine that could accelerate the awakening of abilities, and was effective in suppressing the zombie virus. Unfortunately, they didn't know about it beforehand, and all the pills had already become unavailable. Xia Yun went to a distant pharmacy in hopes of finding the medicine for her brother, ignoring Xia Yan's pleas not to go there because it was dangerous outside. She was caught by the villains who felt free during the apocalypse. Xia Yan never saw her again in that life. But this time, he was determined not to let it happen again. As for the Song family, they know that the end of the world is coming and will surely stock up on food. But our hero hoped that they didn't know about the most important resource in the early stages of the apocalypse, which is not food at all, but the awakened with supernatural powers. If Xia Yan could get his hands on a bunch of shanking pills, he would be able to gain many abilities that would make him like an army. He took out his token and ordered his hellfire to ignite. By doing so, he consumed the fire spirit he had sealed in the Song family's ancestral estate. Immediately afterward, he awakened the power of the flaming lotus. And Sudaji didn't miss such an opportunity to congratulate the warden for successfully improving his ability. With the power of the flaming lotus, Xia Yan would now be able to break barriers and destroy illusions. For example, now the illusion of the wine lake and meat forest will not be a hindrance to our hero. But that's not all. Also now he can now more accurately control the shape of fire and even create a fire sword for himself. In the end, absorbing that fire spirit was even more useful than Xia Yan had expected. As you can imagine, this ability was not limited to a single fire sword. As soon as he entered the dungeon, Black Bear and Sudaji began to fight for his attention. All because this dungeon had a sin karma system. Every time prisoners performed tasks for the warden, their sin karma would be reduced, and the conditions of their imprisonment would be lessened. For example, a Black Bear reduced his sin karma to 90 for helping to fight a fire spirit ancestor, and received an extra portion of meat for it. Such excessive attention from the prisoners did not please our hero, and he pushed them away. The Thunder Raven was watching all this. He despised these weak mutts who were ready to crawl in front of the warden for a small profit, and he warned our hero that if he tried to summon him, he would regret it. After all, he will not obey and simply escape from prison. Xia Yan was not disturbed by this. As his abilities grow, he will gain access to the next floor with stronger prisoners, and the Thunder Raven will be completely unnecessary for him. When that time comes, the Thunder Raven will have to beg him himself to be used by our hero. As Xia Yan's strength grew, the prison warden's token was also filled with energy. It was just in time because the blood moon was getting bigger and bigger, and the apocalypse was getting closer by the day. Our guy should hurry up and spend the remaining money as soon as possible. The next day, Xia Yan went to the jewelry auction. Here he hoped to obtain a very powerful artifact. When the apocalypse comes, all the ordinary resources will be quickly looted. But they are not as important as ability enhancement cores, which can only be obtained by killing zombies or using rare artifacts. Just such an artifact found our hero. With its help, he will be able to improve his abilities from the 2nd to the 3rd level. In his previous life, one lucky guy got this stone and developed his abilities before anyone else, gaining countless advantages. But this time, it will be our hero in his place. A few hours later, the stone was put up for auction at a price of 3 millions. According to experts' estimates, it turned out that this raw stone had a huge potential, and the jadeite inside it could be worth at least 5 millions. Immediately, buyers began to raise the bids and gradually reached 4 millions. But suddenly some rich son of a bitch bid 5 millions at once, and everyone else lost interest, because if this rich bastard was interested in the subject, the others did not want to cross him knowing that he owned one of the biggest companies in China. As a reward for staying out of his way, he invited everyone to have a drink at his expense next time. Suddenly Xiaoyan entered the room and raised the bet to 6 millions. Everyone around was puzzled as to where this student had come from, and where he had gotten such money to bid. One of the organizers of the auction immediately ran up to our guy and said that they have a membership system here, and to participate in the auction must have a black bank card as proof of solvency. Fortunately, with tens of millions in his account, Xiaoyan already had such a bank card. As soon as this guy saw the card, his behavior changed drastically. Meanwhile, the auction continued, and the girl leading the auction asked if anyone wanted to bid more. Of course, that rich bastard was not going to give up so easily and raised his bid to 7 millions. But that didn't help him. Xiaoyan didn't change his mind and immediately bid 10 millions. Everyone was shocked by such a bet. It far exceeded the price of the processed gem inside. The girl that was with that rich bastard advised him to calm down and not to continue to measure his dignity with this loser who only pretends to be rich. Surprisingly enough, he listened to her and backed off, but finally asked her what our hero's name was, and promised to memorize his name and how cool he is. Maybe the next time they meet, victory will be on his side. Finally, Xiaoyan got what he wanted. Even just holding the container with stone in his hands, he could feel its power and his eye lit up with red flames. There was nothing more for our guy to do here, and he headed for the exit. Behind presented the next lot, an ancient feather fan inlaid with precious stones. No sooner had Xiaoyan reached the door than the frightened cries about monster and requests for help were heard behind him. Everyone was trying to save their lives when the spirit of a giant snake burst out of the fan. This snake had an almost human face and flew straight at our hero, ignoring everyone else. Xiaoyan speculated that the summoning of this monster could be due to the fact that this fan before the auction was lying too close to the stone and managed to absorb some of its energy. Besides, the end of the world was getting closer, which also gave the monster more power. After all, the world is about to fall into chaos, and such supernatural events are only small signs of the coming disaster. The rich blonde guy was not a coward at all, and in the face of unknown danger did not run to hide like everyone else. He tried to attack the snake with a telescopic stick, but expectedly it did not bring any result. The snake didn't even feel his blow and rushed straight at Xiaoyan. To everyone's surprise, Xiaoyan didn't even move when he caught the snake by the neck and put the fire collar on it. With the improved flame control, stopping the overgrown snake was easy. Then he activated the lotus flame, and the flames began to destroy the shell of this spirit. After a couple seconds, all that was left of the snake was another spirit crystal. If Xiaoyan uses it, he can gain new abilities. However, judging from the fact that this spirit's level wasn't high, he would only be able to obtain a small ability from it. Xiaoyan was about to leave when the rich blonde man behind him fell to his knees. He recognized that our hero was a true master and wanted to become his disciple to obtain a similar power as well. However, he would have to wait, all in good time. After a couple of hours, the front of Xiaoyan's house was covered with boxes and cages with animals. This all started to attract the attention of his neighbors. They were puzzled as to how Xiaoyan had gotten so rich and why he had bought so many things. Most of them concluded that he was going to start his own business and were happy for him. However, not everyone was so kind. There was one nasty lady who did not like that Xiaoyan was doing well. She was sure that he would never be able to open his own store. But the main reason was that Auntie Zhang had her eye on the warehouse that belonged to Xiaoyan. She wanted to get her hands on it to open her own store. Of course she didn't want to admit it now. Just then, our guy came in and didn't pay any attention to the crowd of neighbors. He just walked past all these onlookers, wondering what else he could buy with the money left over after buying supplies. When he got closer, the delivery man informed him that they had delivered everything, and asked if Xiaoyan wanted to count it all. But our hero was not going to waste time on that. In addition, another car should arrive tomorrow, and most likely the goods will not fit in this warehouse. At least that's what the delivery guys thought. In order not to draw too much attention to his abilities, Xiaoyan decided that he would pick up everything himself from their central warehouse tomorrow. Zhang overheard all of this and was shaking with envy. She couldn't understand how Xiaoyan had gotten so rich. She knew well that he was an ordinary orphan who had long lost his parents, and he dared to get in her way. How dare he open his store in the place she had first favored? Meanwhile, her little rascal grandson wanted to take a piss, and it looked like she wasn't raising him properly. This little rascal for such a case ran straight to the boxes of our hero. This kid was really shameless. His grandmother's reaction was not right. She even praised him, and began to justify him in front of Xiaoyan that he is small and he can do anything. However, our guy did not think so. He quickly grabbed him by the collar and brought back to Zhang. At the same time, the little boy also managed to give her a golden shower. What did you expect? It's a dumb Chinese manhwa and the jokes are the same. Zhang got mad and said that Xiaoyan can't behave like that. The kid is just playing and he's treating him like that. Of course, the kid started crying. However, all this did not bother our hero. It is his property, and they should stay away from it. So he just slammed the gate right in their faces. Zhang was just twisting with anger for how much she wanted to get revenge on him. Her grandson, meanwhile, wanted to play with firecrackers and scare the neighbors with explosions. That's when she had a brilliant idea. She will buy a bunch of firecrackers not only for her grandson, but also for herself, and in the evening they will make an unforgettable fire show together. Some spark would surely hit the warehouse and cause a fire in Xiaoyan's warehouse, and she couldn't wait to see his face afterward. Meanwhile, our guy locked himself in the warehouse away from prying eyes, and started moving all the boxes and cages into his own prison. Sudaji happily welcomed all the supplies, and not for nothing, she as a cunning fox had her own plans for the chicken. She would finally be able to eat. Xiaoyan of course didn't know anything about this, so he instructed her to place all the supplies in the empty cells. Sudaji considered herself an expert in storing supplies. She even advised Xiaoyan to allocate an area near the tower to keep the animals. After all, if they were infused with the aura of the tower, their meat would become even more delicious, and so they would have an endless supply of chicken to eat. Sudaji's advice helped our hero come up with something even more interesting. The end of the world is approaching, and no one knows how long it will last. Therefore, a smart idea would be to send more different animals to this prison that will help keep human civilization alive. Hearing this, the black bear advised Xiaoyan not to stop at animals and start growing edible plants here. But for that, he would need seeds and fertile soil. Only then would he be able to grow and multiply his supplies, not just endlessly storing supplies in the empty cells of the prison, which would run out sooner or later anyway. Fortunately, Xiaoyan has already purchased enough seeds, but the ground around the dungeon is barren and empty. It is completely dry and unsuitable for agriculture. Fortunately, our hero was not completely stupid and came up with a very simple solution. He went to the nearest suburb to an empty field, and decided to experiment how much land from the real world can hold his prison. Xiaoyan started collecting as much soil as his ability could hold. Sudaji saw such a flood of soil and realized that it would not end well for her, and shouted for our hero to stop, but no one listened to her. In the end, she was almost buried alive. Xiaoyan's soul power was not enough, and the available space was too small to accommodate even more soil. Even so, our guy managed to gather 200 tons of soil, although even that didn't seem to be enough for him. After all, he knew very well that once the apocalypse began, all the surrounding land would become unusable for plants, and the currently fertile land around here would soon become a very rare resource. Therefore, there was no time to waste. Meanwhile, his evil neighbor Zhang started to execute her devious plan and bought a whole box of firecrackers. She just couldn't wait to watch Xiaoyan's warehouse burn down. Suddenly, her grandson ran up to her with an antique mirror in his hands and offered to look into it. Zhang didn't know where he got it from and assumed he could have stolen it from the store where they bought firecrackers. But instead of scolding him for stealing, she praised her clever grandson for giving gifts to his grandmother. There's something wrong with this family. This crazy grandson claimed there was someone in that mirror who really wanted to meet his grandmother. So he forced her to look in the mirror. Right out of it looked at her a demon from ancient myths and legends, but he was more alive than all the living. Frightened, Zhang immediately threw the mirror away, scared to death. But her grandson immediately rushed to bring her mirror back, because he was sure that the grandmother is very fond of herself and her reflection. He made her look at herself again, and this time, the demon broke through to this world, finding a suitable candidate to take over her body. After all, Zhang was as dark inside as the demons. Her grandson, like a true madman, laughed and wanted to play some more games, but he definitely wouldn't like further games now. His grandmother had become as much of a monster on the outside as she was on the inside, and her grandson was her first victim. The apocalypse had begun. The blood moon had reached its maximum size to freeze over the earth forever, and thousands of ghosts and demons burst into this world to punish corrupted humanity. Meanwhile, the last rays of sunlight were still visible on the coast near the port warehouses, still breaking through the looming black clouds. Life was still going on at its usual pace, and when the fishing boat arrived with the catch, everyone was shocked. All the fish caught were mutated, covered in pus and fangs. The fishermen didn't know if they could even eat them. They had no idea about the apocalypse and thought the fish were mutated because of sewage and sea pollution. Inside the warehouse, a loader came to pick up the goods. But there was something wrong with the warehouse manager. He didn't answer but sat silently and cowardly. There was clearly something wrong with this guy. Looks like the zombie virus got to him first. The loader assumed that his colleague just had a cold and suggested that he should take a vacation and go home. Suddenly, a lot of footsteps were heard, and the warehouse was filled with people in black suits. They asked if there were any shanking pills in the warehouse, but the warehouse worker replied that all the goods here have already been bought out by the customer. If they want to make a purchase, they should contact the sales manager and place an order. Their company will try to fulfill the order as soon as possible. But the guys in suits weren't going to wait. They were going to move everything out of here right now. And they didn't give a damn about the loader's objections. One of them just came up to him and grabbed him by the shoulder and threw him like a doll right on his sick manager. The same man hurried the others to get everything loaded faster. Suddenly someone grabbed his leg, and with his claws, he toppled the big man with incredible force. The warehouse manager lost his mind and turned into a zombie with unhuman strength. The other men in suits immediately grabbed their weapons. A shovel has never failed in a fight against zombies, right? Together they managed to finish off the lying zombie and free the leader of their gang. The zombie was defeated, but no one realized what it had just been. In addition, the gang leader had a deep claw wound on his leg, and the zombie virus had already started to enter his body, but he didn't pay attention to that. The main thing for him was to follow orders and get the medicine. If anyone tried to interfere with them, they had to be eliminated immediately. Suddenly, a voice called out to them from the entrance. They weren't expecting visitors at all. It's Xiaoyan who came to get the pills he spent his own money on, and these rascals are trying to steal them. The end of the world hasn't fully arrived yet, and these idiots are already rushing to die. The gang leader thought otherwise. He claimed that this entire logistics port, including all the surrounding buildings, belonged to his boss. The goods hadn't left the port yet, so why didn't Xiaoyan do them a small favor and cancel his order? For this, he could ask for any compensation he wanted. But our hero was not going to sell one of the most valuable resources for money that would soon mean nothing. Xiaoyan gave these bandits a minute to leave the warehouse, otherwise they will face very unpleasant consequences. Noticing the dead body of the manager, he noted that the zombies had already appeared, so there was even less time than he thought. Unfortunately for the gang, they didn't have the sense to get away, and instead decided to attack. But even attacking from the back, none of them managed to even touch Xiaoyan. He was so fast that he seemed to have vanished. Looking around, the thugs finally spotted him, but they still couldn't understand how it was possible to move so fast. Xiaoyan opened one of the boxes full of food, and decided that for their insolence, he would take all the goods from the logistics center with him, since they said it all belonged to their boss. Terrified, the gang leader asked what he wanted. Our guy just opened their eyes to a new reality. It is necessary to use the knowledge of the enemies against them. After all, they were the ones who wanted to rob him, but now he would rob them. The thugs tried to resist, but Xiaoyan's flames didn't leave them a chance. After a couple hours, the battered thugs crawled back to their boss. Their boss turned out to be a very extraordinary lady. She was just furious that her subordinates not only didn't return the medicines, but lost all other goods as well. The leader of the gang started to justify that the man who took everything from them had superpowers. He wasn't just a man, but a real monster. Xiaoyan threw them out of the warehouse and closed the door behind him. When they managed to open the door, the warehouse was already empty. There was so much stuff in there, but in an instant, there was nothing left. Now the only thing the lady was interested in was what this man's name was. One of her gang said that he had checked the information of the pills customer and found out that his name was Xiaoyan. The lady thought about it. She realized that she was not the only one with abilities, and she really wanted to get a man with spatial warehouse abilities. Suddenly, the leader of her gang began to shake and growl like a wild animal, and in the next instant, he fell to the floor. Looks like the zombie virus has defeated him and the lady should get the hell out of here. But the lady did not seem to be frightened at all. Moreover, she immediately concluded that the virus had already penetrated into the man's brain, and that even medicine would not save him. Since there was nothing to be done, she ordered the others to burn the man, warning them to be careful not to come into blood contact with him. But suddenly the man moved and rushed toward the lady. It would seem that she was finished. But instead of running away, the lady began to gather magic in her hand. Dozens of living branches rushed into the room and pierced the man. Now it was clear why the lady was so confident. Once the zombies were finished, she told the rest of the shocked guards not to be surprised by something like this, for this was just the beginning. She ordered them to keep looking for medicines and stockpiling weapons, and to use the warehouse as a base. Only these preparations could save them from what lay ahead. And what lay ahead of them was a real hell, and the lady knew it very well. At the same time, Xiaoyun asked Xiaoyan why he brought Shanking pills, to which he replied that the water and air were no longer pure. From now on, they had to drink only mineral water and take 3 Shanking pills every day. In case Xiaoyun suddenly became cold, she would have to inform him immediately. Xiaoyun didn't understand why this was necessary, and asked Xiaoyan to explain to her about what happened. Our hero also thought that it was time for that too, so he promised his sister to tell everything on the walk. Although the apocalypse had not fully arrived yet, the eerie atmosphere was already in the air. Even Xiaoyun could feel it perfectly. The reason for this was the demons that were beginning to appear more and more frequently, and it wasn't somewhere far away. Literally, strange sounds were already coming from the neighboring apartment. Zhang had already managed to turn into a zombie demon and eat her grandson. Losing all common sense, she rushed outside with shouts of curses to wreak havoc full of her endless greed. After a while, heartbreaking screams started coming from the house. At the same time, Xiaoyan along with Xiaoyun were already getting into a cab. Ruolan and her mother were walking nearby. The treacherous Ruolan was proudly showing the house she planned to live in with Xiaoyan. In order to become his girlfriend again, she even borrowed a lot of money and had the most expensive plastic surgery in the country. In her opinion, Xiaoyan would not be able to resist such beauty. The reason Ruolan went for it was because he had suddenly become very strong. And if she could make him her own, she could use his abilities to her advantage. Suddenly, they spotted Xiaoyan, who was going somewhere in a cab. He was a treasure that couldn't be missed, so they followed him without a second thought. Xiaoyan and Xiaoyun arrived at the zoo, where they could already see the signs of the apocalypse coming. The animals that were usually friendly, for some reason on this day behaved very aggressively. On the way here, Xiaoyan had already told Xiaoyun that the world would soon end, and that people would either turn into zombies or gain superpowers. Our boy didn't tell his sister about that painful experience from his past life. He explained his knowledge of the future by the fact that he had awakened his abilities early and could see the future. Realizing the danger of the situation, Xiaoyun asked why they came to the zoo instead of seeking shelter. Xiaoyun replied that escaping could only be temporary, and it wouldn't solve the whole problem. If they wanted to survive the coming hell, they must awaken their strength. Although he already possessed enough power, he could not stay by Xiaoyun's side forever. Therefore, in case of an unforeseen situation, she must be able to stand up for herself. In a word, she should also become stronger. Sister Yun glowed at the prospect of awakening her abilities and becoming as strong as her brother. She didn't want to be a burden at all. The zoo seemed to have nothing to do with it, but we're about to find out. All this time, Ruolan and her equally greedy mother were watching them. They didn't understand why Xiaoyan had come to the zoo, but the main thing for them was to organize a chance meeting where Ruolan would charm him with her beauty. Before the meeting, she decided to adjust her makeup and stopped by the enclosure with the llamas, but something in their red eyes tells us that it wouldn't end well. Meanwhile, Xiaoyan and his sister arrived at the turtle park. Sudaji immediately appeared and said that she felt something special in this place. Black Bear wasn't silent either and expressed his attitude towards turtles, which he didn't like at all. They are hard to fight, tough, and live longer than anyone else. At last they came to the right place. The oldest turtle in all of China and maybe the world. It was so old that it was even known to Sudaji and Black Bear. Xiaoyan knew that this turtle had been living here since the day the zoo opened and was definitely over 100 years old. It had even been given a name. On the sign was written a long-lived turtle with the name Nanny. Such a name was a bit unexpected and not at all fitting. In its past life, this turtle was famous because one of the demons tried to take over the zoo after the apocalypse started. But this old turtle got in his way. It even bit him. Their battle lasted for days, but the demon never managed to break through its shell. In the end, the demon was forced to retreat. Xiaoyan thought that it would be very good to persuade this turtle to protect Sister Yun. Then she would definitely be safe. Our hero approached the old turtle and asked for its help, but there was no response. The turtle only looked at him with an indifferent look. Then Xiaoyan decided to try another method. He activated his lotus flame and said that he was hungry after the walk and was going to make turtle soup. That's when the turtle immediately became active. He even spoke, irritated by the fact that people are annoying creatures who are always in a hurry. The turtle thought that threatening a creature if it didn't answer you was a sign of lack of manners. But since they had already come, he was willing to listen to them. Xiaoyan said that the apocalypse is about to begin and time is running out, and he asked to protect his younger sister Yun. Yun was surprised that the turtle could talk and that his name was Nanny. In fact, it is a long story. More than 100 years ago, the turtle saved a girl in the sea who later created this zoo. She is the one who named him Nanny, and he ended up with such an embarrassing name because of the accident. Hundreds of years have passed since then. But compared to the lifespan of this turtle, which is 3,000 years, it is just a blink of an eye. Sudaji and the black bear immediately wanted to eat the spirit of this turtle to extend their lives by a few hundred years. But our hero could not allow them to do so. Xiaoyan once again repeated his request to protect his sister, and asked what conditions the turtle had for him to agree to it. Looking back at the blood moon and the general commotion around the ancient turtle thought for a moment. He knew well that when the end of the world comes, turtles will suffer as much as humans. So our guy suggested hiding all the turtles from this pond in the demon suppression tower. There, he could create a pond for them and raise them into creatures as majestic as the ancient turtle. At the mention of the demon suppression tower, the ancient turtle's eyes flashed with rage. He knew all too well who was imprisoned in that tower, and who had created it. At its very top is the one who once ruled this world, and the ancient turtle was his loyal pet. He simply cannot allow an unworthy man to rule this prison. That is why he nailed to this place and waited here for hundreds of years. The arrival of the one who will have the key to the tower of suppression of demons. The ancient turtle doubted that such a young boy could run such a dreadful prison. If he failed, he could unleash creatures so powerful that the zombie apocalypse would seem like a walk in the park. To prove that he is worthy of the role of prison warden, Xiaoyan must bear the weight of 3,000 years of turtle life. Our hero prepared to take the blow. And with the help of the lotus flame, he began to hold the weight of the turtle. Even the ground beneath his feet began to collapse. But it didn't stop there. The turtle was getting bigger and heavier, and it seemed that the whole clearing was about to collapse under his weight. Ruolan also felt that something was happening nearby. She was sure that Xiaoyan was there and wanted to get there quickly. But before she could run, her wig was ripped off her head along with a piece of her hair. That's something that bitch didn't expect. The red-eyed llama decided it was better for this gold digger to look as she really is. Ruolan used her purse and threats to try to get her wig back, but nothing good came out of it. She only got spit in the face from a llama as the final touch to her makeup. She just got what she deserved, so she has nothing to complain about.